Welcome back to Panther Shadow, and it is Victory Week. Week one could probably not have gone a whole lot better, and we get to talk about it today. I'm Jake, and I am joined, as always, by Jack. And believe it or not, this is actually the first recording since or following a Victory Monday after a Victory Sunday. Last year, things kind of fizzled out after the first loss, and didn't really record after that. So this is actually the first, like I said, first recording after a victory, and it feels different. It feels good. How are you feeling?
I would like to say that I'm feeling pretty good, and well, that's because I am feeling pretty good. It was a huge win for the Panthers. An exciting game to watch. There was a bit in the middle there that kind of felt a bit bumpy. We'll get to that later, but on the whole, yeah, it was a pretty solid performance. From Michigan, really felt like a new team. It did not. This was not the 2022 Michigan Panthers rebooted. This was a new team with new goals.
And yeah, you could see that right from the onset. It was great to see. I don't know. I can't like I can't really be any happier. The fact that we get to start 1-0, and as I've said this week already, and others have said, we are halfway to last year's win total after just 1 week. So, uh,
Yeah.
we, those of us, that have survived last year, definitely should be feeling pretty good this year. And yeah, I'm excited to see what this weekend especially brings because, as I said, as we'll discuss it's going to be a good, big, big matchup already.
Yeah, two top teams in the North clash. You know, take three against the Stars. It should be a fun game. I like winning. I like being the gamblers, but now we gotta step it up a little bit more. Show to the rest of the league that we are legit.
Plus, I think if we come out and win this week, you know, it'll have further ramifications, especially with attendance at the home games. So, really important this week, more than just winning and obviously setting the season up for a winning record. So, a lot of implications that go with that. But before we get into our matchup that I'm super excited to talk about, let's get a some housekeeping out of the way. Now, we did actually get some news this week. Kind of a slow news week, not really anything surprising. I didn't expect that we were going to get a whole lot, but got a couple things. First thing's kind of pretty exciting is that we're actually going to have an MC. WWE is coming to Detroit in August with their SummerSlam, so of course they were going to tie in that, and as we mentioned a couple weeks ago with the theme nights, there was a WWE night, so they are leaning even more into that with bringing Big E in as the Detroit MC for all the Panthers home games, which is going to be more than just him, on the loudspeaker, but there's going to be pre and post game fan interactions, game time interviews with fans, and of course, on field recognitions and touchdown celebrations. So I don't know a whole lot about him, to be honest. Didn't really feel the need to go in and learn much about Big E, but from what I saw on Twitter interactions, I mean, my one reply to the Panthers tweet got quite a bit of quite a bit of views. So, I mean, clearly people had their eyes on that and were interested. So that seems to have at least created a little bit of buzz.
Well, yeah, 'cause, I mean, Big E himself. I looked at him a little bit. He does have a pretty huge social following, over 1 million followers on Instagram alone, and I think also over a million on Twitter. So that gets some really nice engagement for the Panthers. Especially if he posts more throughout the regular season. Again, like for me, it's not like a big deal maker or deal breaker, but I can imagine like for some people it would be pretty cool. It's like, oh hey, this wrestler that I like is going to be at the Panthers game. might encourage some more people to show up. I'm all for anything that gets people to show up, really. So and apparently he's also posted his jersey already that he got on
Oh yeah, the
Instagram. He got
313.
yeah, which makes me wonder where was this ability to customize? Well, there's the personalized one, so I guess what am I complaining about?
Yeah, that's cool though. Maybe they'll sell more of those at the Panthers games. Who knows? That wouldn't be the worst idea.
Yeah, even if the numbering looks a bit weird cuz 3 digits on a jersey always looks weird.
Yeah, but it works. Big E needs a big number
Yeah.
for the big D.
Yeah. Absolutely. And speaking of heading down to another hub in terms of ways to get fans in, Canton, I think it was actually just today or yesterday,
Just today, yep.
announced that they're now going to have club seats and like actual club seats available for $85 per game. When you go to Canton, you get an all you can eat buffet, free domestic beer, wine, water, and soft drinks, cushioned seats, and access to the club lounge, which, wow, all that for only $85.
I mean, that seems steep until you, like you said, you realize the all you can eat buffet and the free drinks. Now, that's where I did end up getting to sit with the championship game last year. So I know exactly what the club all entails, and I mean, it's nice. It's not super, super fancy. It is, after all, kind of a high school football stadium, but the lounge is really nice. The seats are comfortable, good view for that. So, and I think for the season tickets, it's 550 and there's 11 games being played, including our game on Sunday against the Stars. So for 11 games for 550, we're talking $50 a game, which for, you know, for what you're getting, pro football and all that, yeah, I don't know how much you could do any better than that. If you don't plan on going concessions, maybe that doesn't make sense. But if you plan to go to a game and get some
Yeah.
concessions, then you start to make that money back quite in a hurry. So if
You,
anybody, yeah, wants to venture down there, then that's good deal to look into. But
yeah,
probably one
especially
I'm not
again.
going to.
Yeah, especially again, you consider you go to any like college or NFL game, $85 in a lot of cases will barely get you a seat in the building. Never mind all the extras that you get at Canton. Once again, the USFL making itself out to be one of the best in-person deals in probably all of sports. I gotta say.
I love it. It doesn't sound like we're gonna get to do anything like that with Detroit. For what I know, like we're gonna have our club section, those three middle sections that'll be kind of blocked off for us club members to be able to do. But I don't know if they're, and I can't imagine with the being the $100 for our season tickets that they're going to doing things super special there. They haven't talked anything. I haven't heard anything about expanding like they are in Canton to actually use the actual club seats. I was told that we weren't able to, get that going at Ford Field, which makes sense to me. So don't quite get that level of extravagance in Ford Field, but I'm not complaining. I like my $100 seats.
Yeah. Again, during the deal, I think it's pretty dang good. Meanwhile, also hopping back here into Detroit, we're going to talk a little bit more about some other pre-game festivities for April 30th. But as I saw, actually today it came up as an ad on my social media. 101 WRIF is officially hosting a pre-game tailgate for the Michigan Panthers home opener.
Do we know where that's actually going to be at, or did they just?
It was downtown. I don't remember the exact location, but they are hosting it. So you can go onto the WRIF website. Obviously, big for them because that makes now at least 3 known pregame parties that are happening for the Panthers, and getting one of the biggest radio broadcasters here in Detroit involved. definitely helps.
Yeah, and like you talked about the other ones, Motor City Meetup, if you've been following along at all, that is definitely going to be a thing that USFL Podcast is doing. They did Spring Stock last weekend, and Ref is coming back to his old stomping grounds in Detroit, so he and Zach are going to come up on the 30th on week 3, and they're going to do Motor City Meetup. I'm going to be involved. You're going to be involved. A couple other USFL newsroom guys being involved, including community legend Ducky. So we'll be all doing that. Not entirely sure of where that's going to be at yet. I know that we talked to some other guys in the area, just in general, outside of Motor City Meetup, and talking about pregame being at Brass Rail. So well, I'm trying to finagle getting Motor City Meetup to be there as well, so we don't have to do too many jumping around. So that's all to be
Yeah,
determined yet. But there is going to be something at the very least at Brass Rail, even if Motor City Meetup doesn't work out. But if it does, then we'll have even more people excited for that. Get to meet a bunch of people that I haven't got to meet yet, and see Zach and Ref, which I haven't seen, who I haven't seen since summer stock. So good
yeah.
times on that. And
And
then I'm sorry, good.
I was gonna say also great for Brass Rail, walking distance from Ford Field, so you don't have to worry about, driving the car the extra miles. Nice little spot down in downtown Detroit.
Yeah, that was especially what I was looking for. I didn't want to do anything too far because no, I'm going to be standing a lot during the game. Would rather not have to walk a whole lot pre-game. So that was definitely our big aim there. Now, back to a couple of the other things that the league came out with. Today, they had mentioned that 9 USFL officials have actually already been selected to officiate the NFL this year. Now, those 9 officials are not going to just leave the USFL. They are going to continue to work the USFL this year before heading off to the NFL. So that makes now 17 officials over the last 2 years to go to the NFL out of 22 new NFL officials. So big numbers. Clearly, the USFL is not only putting, player talent back into other leagues. Hell, they're even doing that with coaches and other opportunities. So the league is definitely achieving one of their goals is to kind of make this, a way for everybody involved to grow. So great to see that.
Yeah, and I mean, when it comes to that, also like refs, they're working a year round, and I know especially if you're in the spring, it can be a lot harder to find work if you're a ref who maybe makes it more of a job for them, as a full time. It's awesome to see, these guys getting that cross talent, showing that they know the rules, showing that they can make these calls. Um, and the fact that now the majority of new NFL officials over the last 2 years, the vast majority, have at least a bit of USFL experience. That's just awesome.
And hey, there's no shortage of a need of good officiating in the NFL. God, is that bad?
You're telling me.
So I like to say it. Hopefully that does it does work out
Yeah.
to where we see better officiating in the NFL because sometimes it's just downright unbearable.
Yeah, so meanwhile, yeah, but in terms of where these guys are getting their eyeballs, this week the viewership numbers came out. It was around 784,000 people on average watching across the 4 broadcasts this week. Down a bit from 2022, week 1.
For week 1, yeah,
Um,
that was what, up 4% overall of the average of last year, but, that's to be expected for week 1.
yeah. But luckily for us, out of all 8 spring ball games played this weekend, Michigan versus Houston was the top dog with 974,000 viewers on NBC at high noon.
Not quite 1,000,000, but close. Like I said, definitely closer than anybody else.
Yeah, which is interesting to me. The fact that the NBC game that didn't get promoted as heavily, and especially at noon on a Sunday where, there probably isn't as many people out and about. There are probably people out, at church or at, their youth soccer game or whatever. Still great numbers. The rest of the games were as follows. Memphis versus Philadelphia averaged 837,000 at the late afternoon slot on Fox. Birmingham versus New Jersey clocked in around 864,000 for the prime time. And New Orleans at Pittsburgh for the FS1 telecast still held up on its own fairly well, 483,000 viewers.
I mean, there were
Uh,
definitely worse broadcasts last year. Certainly, our Week 4 matchup versus the Stars was pretty bad, being 10:30 kickoff. So even then, even just shy of 500,000 is not too bad.
yeah, especially for cable on Sunday night. I think it was also going up against baseball on OTA, so not bad at all. It's a very sorry, very solid viewership numbers from the USFL, showing that it's holding strong. You know, um, the competition this weekend was very stiff. From the XFL, from other sports, um, and of course, like showing that it has sustainability, that it has a core group of fans, and it has a fan base, and it has staying power. So that's a huge win for the USFL just to even have like a sustained viewership. And like we didn't experience like some massive drop off a cliff.
Yeah, which is great because that'll be beneficial for, well, I can only imagine it's going to get better once we actually have more games in front of fans, which will pick up after this week as well. So
Yeah,
I'm
and
curious
it's
to see what the trend's going to be, because like you expect in week 1 that's going to be maybe the highest, like we've seen with the AAF, with XFL 2020, with USFL last year, with XFL this year. But the difference being, this is not a novel league. This is not a brand new league. So will there be a drop off even? And if there is, will it be as significant? Because if it's as significant, then that might be an issue. But I feel like the fact that it's not a novel league now, that this is, USFL returning, we might not see that same immediate drop off.
Yeah, and I think the fact that just week 1 was as good as it was, I think kind of shows that there's at least a solid core audience. And you have to remember also in a few weeks' time, the USFL is going to be the only spring ball game in town. So what might actually end up happening is that we'll have a really weird looking graph where, we start where we are, we go down for a few weeks, and around week 5 or 6, we shoot back up a little bit because the USFL in a few weeks is going to be completely unobstructed, from the XFL, which does siphon away not a huge amount of it didn't siphon away as many viewers as I think maybe people were expecting, but they have their core fan base and they have people who flipped over to them from the USFL from last year. So that's going to happen. And so we might see a bit of a uptick once the XFL season wraps up.
Yeah, I think you'll see actually a couple different upticks. You'll see an uptick in week 4, because I believe the XFL has a week in between the division championships and their actual championship. So we'll have an uptick in week 4. Then their championship game will be week 5. And then week 6 beyond for us will be, no other football competition. So definitely going to be interesting how that works. As you pointed out, we are going up against the XFL. So you can look at the numbers and go, "Ooh, those are not very gaudy numbers," and you'd be right. But yeah, you have to take in the fact that we're not a novel league, and going head to head in some cases, a couple of these games directly with the XFL.
Yeah.
So I'm
'Cause if I'm
optimistic.
yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think 2 or 3 of the games went head to head with XFL games on at the same time. And in the case of Mauler's Breakers, I think that was even they were both on cable, so you know, a few things hampering the Wings, but on the whole, pretty solid viewership.
Yeah, I'm happy with it. Just like I am happy with the trajectory of the tickets sales for week 3. I've noticed on Ticketmaster that they continue to open up seats especially in the corner sections. So that seems to be where a lot of people are going, which makes sense. That those are the cheapest seats, the $10 a game or the $25 for the season tickets. So those are going. There's clearly a demand there, and from what I know, we're still on that trajectory of hitting what Moose wants of that 15K. So I'm excited for that. I'm hoping that that continues to be a thing. I know, like with the first 20 rows of all the sections that they have is somewhere around like 10,000. So I'm super excited for when they go beyond those first 20 rows. They open up more of those sections, then we'll really be hitting in our stride. So I hope to see that. And again, with a win on Sunday, I I expect that to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, there have been times where I've checked Ticketmaster too, where they will have sections just straight up grayed out. Like for that moment in time, they sold out.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
the Panthers are doing very well. Now, of course, the one downside is that it may not look the best on TV at times because it appears the USFL isn't doing like what they did in Birmingham and Memphis, where they just kind of stuck everyone on one side of the stadium
Right, and
to
I
improve
think
like the look on TV.
yeah, and if you've noticed, like, our tickets, if you look at our tickets for the Stars games, they're all general admission for those. So, that's probably what we're gonna see, with Stars games going forward, other than, for the Panthers, those are, they're gonna cram everybody into the 20 rows.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a unique way of doing it. And I'm sure, like again, they want to make this look good on TV, so I don't blame them for doing it. Uh, yeah. But speaking of numbers, and speaking of things going up for the Panthers, the latest Vegas title odds came out just a few days ago here, and the Panthers moving on up in the world. Still, the favorites to win the league are the Birmingham Stallions at plus 225. The Stars jumped up to plus 375 to win the title. Generals fell too much. They're down to 450. Breakers are at 550. Panthers now sit at plus 600. Showboats sit at plus 900. The Gamblers sit at plus 1100. And last but not least, the Maulers sit at plus 1500. The longest shot to win the USFL title.
And after their performance on Sunday, do not, I don't blame Vegas whatsoever. Which is interesting to me, though. Like, if you look at the numbers between the Stallions and the Panthers, like what, 375, but then the next closest to us is the Showboats at plus 900. So clearly, it looks like Vegas sees that there is a little bit of a gap with the top 5 teams in their eyes versus the bottom 3, which is really interesting to me. I'm still not quite sure why Vegas has New Orleans above us, but you know, this weekend and all the next weekends, well, honestly, I don't care if Vegas ever believes in us. As long as we
Yeah.
keep moving, I mean, that's all that matters. Like I've said in
Yeah.
in Discords, It's the games aren't won, the titles aren't won in Vegas, so with their bets, so
Yeah.
they can be doubters.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting though. I think the biggest thing that intrigued me was the fact they're still as high as they are in the general. I
Yes. Oh yeah.
understand that it's week one, they don't want to overreact, but the generals looked really rough. So I'm surprised they still have them at the third best odds. Never mind, not that far out either. Only plus 450. If they were like a distant third, I could kind of get it, but no, Vegas still has some faith in the generals.
Yeah, it was a little surprising when I saw that. I would not take that bet.
No, no, not as things currently stand.
But what bet I will take though is more records being broken. We've already seen a couple this past weekend, if I'm not mistaken. I know one for sure. I believe the other one, the first 300-yard game, I believe, is what we've seen in this iteration of the USFL, or maybe even altogether. Um, is MBT got his 302 yards. He had to get that in volume because he threw quite a bit against the Maulers to hit that mark, but he did get 300, so that was an impressive outing. Definitely the leader in passing yards so far after 1 week. But what I know for a fact is a USFL record all time is completion percentage. And that is our QB1, Josh Love, went 18 for 20 on Sunday to get a 90% completion percentage. And again, he is in the record books with a minimum, and this is with a minimum of 14 pass attempts. So,
Yeah.
hell of an accomplishment. He was slinging the ball, he was accurate, he put it where it needed to be, and obviously you can't do much better than that. 90% is pretty spectacular.
Yeah, and especially considering the amount of difficult passes that he was making too. Like he wasn't making like a lot of the passes that he was making, they weren't into like completely open space. He had to find tight windows. He had to throw into coverage. He had to throw in man-on-man situations. Like honestly, if you had told me he had an 80% completion percentage, I'd be flabbergasted. But the fact that he took what the Gamblers defense was giving him and put up 90% completion is insane.
Yeah, him and Marty teamed up for quite the efficient offense over this past weekend. Really kind of showcasing what we were talking about before in, the QB race, who is going to be QB1, and the fact that, having that knowledge, that second year with Marty and letting Marty also take over, just run the offense and have a year under his belt. I mean, I expect more 90% completion games this year? Probably
No.
not. Like, again, it's a record-breaking performance for a reason. Not gonna see it often, but the fact that it happened in week 1 of all weeks, just kinda shows, that we got something there. It's only going to get better from there. We're only gonna be a better, more cohesive, efficient offense from here. So, seeing that happen w was awesome, and as it just kinda gives you some optimism for what we're gonna see the rest of the year.
Yeah, especially again for Josh Love. His first win in the USFL of his career.
As a
A
starter,
guy
yes.
who a guy who last year, was probably considered like, oh, who is he? Who's this guy? Then comes out, unleashes onto everyone, huge effort from Josh Love. It's great to see.
I mean, it did enough to, get him a little bit of an award now, didn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, he won USFL Offensive Player of the Week, and the vote was not close. Even he was
Not
running
at all.
away with it pretty much from the jump. USFL fans, they look at more than just yards, and you can tell that they are some very smart people. Because not only did the Panthers win Offensive Player of the Week, no, we also won Defensive Player of the Week with Breland Speaks, the defensive lineman who went off this weekend and just was
Dude,
flying through.
he had a game. It was something.
Now, much to my chagrin, I do have some terrible news. We did not complete the sweep. We
We
did
did
not
not.
win Special Teams Player of the Week. And
No,
granted, the way our special teams played this week, we did not deserve it. But Matt Conklin from the Breakers won. So
yeah,
good on
he
him.
went 5 of yeah, he went 5 of 5, which they needed pretty much every last one of them until the end, and until the Breakers were able to, get that win after starting on the 50-yard line. So, but hell of a performance by him. I gotta give him credit for that. But I mean, that just gives our special teams something to work for. Because yeah, definitely that was probably our weakest. So no, we did not deserve, nor did we get the clean sweep.
Yeah, we were close. We got 2 of the 3.
Which
You
is
know,
more than what we did last year. Like, I
yeah.
know we won a couple, at least one offensive player of the week. I know Cole Murphy won a couple special teams player of the week, but we just did not have nearly that dominant of a performance. And yeah, the player of the week awards, I think, just kind of more evidence of just how dominant of a win. And everybody had eyes on the Panthers, and it's great that it's not them pointing and laughing at us.
Yeah, you know, if it felt I remember reading around on Twitter, like, not seeing us as, like, kind of the butt of the joke for once. It was kind of fun. Or,
Yeah,
like,
we
not
got a
even, like, the
lot of
butt of
respect.
yeah, not even, like, the butt of the joke, because that was, the Maulers. We were more like the lower back of the joke.
It was definitely a nice change of pace from last year. Certainly had a lot of pessimism going into this year from pundits and, you know, so-called writers. So it was nice to see a little bit of respect put on the Panthers name, make us feel a little bit justified in some of our homerism, and hopefully we keep that train rolling.
Yeah, one can only hope.
And we have a new body to help us do it too. So other teams made quite a few roster moves this week. Panthers didn't really make too many. We did end up placing defensive back Corey Rahman on IR. He obviously left the game on Sunday injured, so we did end up placing him on IR and signing defensive back Tyree Robinson out of East Tennessee State. Now, did not hear anything about him before our signing, so kind of I actually did my due diligence on this one and looked him up. He was undrafted in last year, so in 2022, but he did spend some time with Panthers, the other Panthers, the NFL's Panthers, which seems to be a thing. We've been doing, signing a few players that have spent some time in that Panthers camp. Clearly, he
It's
didn't
like
stick.
I was gonna
Go
say,
ahead.
it's like a hey, you liked playing with those Panthers. How would you like coming to play for the other Panthers, eh? Hey.
And add another layer to that, he is actually reunited with one of his coaches from East Tennessee in our new DC, Steve Brown. So Brown was with East Tennessee last year, and he gets to be reunited with his guy. And I think that familiarity, as we saw with or not the Breakers, but the Stallions last year, maybe there's something to it.
Yeah. One can only hope, at least in this case. Um, again, like the defense, the secondary already looked pretty damn good last week. If Tyree Robinson brings in what we hope he can bring, it'll take it to another level. Hope one can hope.
Well, so my post on Instagram and Twitter with his signing have blown up. Dude has quite the support. So definitely So that definitely sparked my interest to make sure I knew a little bit more about him than maybe I've done some of our other free agent signings. But took a look at some of his highlights, and dude is a physical corner. Like, he will throw his body into tackles. He will throw his body to chase fumbles. Like, dude is not afraid to hit. Dude is not afraid to tackle. Didn't, obviously highlights aren't going to showcase missed tackles, but dude was all over it. Physical guy. Super excited to be able to see what he can do. Obviously, I don't expect him to take the field this week. I expect one of the guys that were on the practice squad to, get moved up to active roster. But as long as Ramen is on IR, I think Robinson will have a chance to make his way to or at least attempt to make his way to the active roster. And I'd love to see, I'd love to see that physicality. So I'm excited to see what he might be able to bring. And then speaking of that, we are still looking forward to see who that 40th active roster guy is. I'm again going to assume it's probably going to be a defensive back to replace Ramen, but
Yeah.
we won't know until probably Saturday again, because that is seems to be when the league gets out um those flip cards in depth charts. So I'll of course be tweeting that out, but unfortunately we don't have that for this recording, and that's probably going to be the theme for the rest of the year as well.
Yeah. We unfortunately don't record these podcasts on Saturday. We record them on Thursdays. But speaking of people who could possibly get called up, looking back down on the practice squad, there were two player names that were on our practice squad last week that I think both you and I were scratching our heads about.
Yeah.
Delano Hill and Wap Fillier. Both of them were listed as inactive last week for the game. And it seemed to be, at least on Fillier's case, it seemed to be like that that it might have been a healthy scratch too.
Yeah, I know Delano was working through something. He was on the game status report, looking here now, and yeah, he was listed as probable with his left hamstring being an issue. So I like that might have played a part in it, and maybe they just decided to, because we are deep in the secondary and how we played on Sunday, that very well could be the case. So was definitely surprised to not see him on the depth chart on the active roster, but maybe one that to keep an eye for. But no, Fillier was not injured at all, not that I can see, not that I'm looking at. So that one was definitely surprising to me.
Yeah, and I definitely think that Hill could probably make a case for being called up to the active roster this week, depending on how he's feeling. He's a safety, but I'm sure you could probably work with him to be on the lower end of the corner depth chart if be. He, again, he's a good player. It most likely was not a healthy scratch. So we'll have to see about that in a few days' time. Meanwhile, speaking of someone else to make the active roster, as I go into Mike Tyson mode, uh, when exactly will we see Santrell Latham make his first appearance on our active roster, coming in from our draft pile?
I still think we're probably a week or two out before he's actively competing for that. I mean, again, have you seen how deep our linebacking core is? Like,
I mean,
our
yeah,
backers
true.
were our backers were something else on Sunday. So, like, as much as I'm super excited to see him make the active roster, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't this year. Love to see that he is on the roster, even if he just has to remain on the practice squad. But with the backer core that we have, I don't know, man. It's going to be at least a couple of weeks, I think, before he can crack the active roster.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's kind of one of those things where it's like I don't know if you've seen the meme where it's like DJ Khaled suffering from success in this respect in the linebacking core. Again, I think it'll be great once he does, but I think it'll definitely be more of a case of if he makes it, it's because he is just like that good. I'm not saying he isn't, but that he'll have to actively put himself out there as opposed to, oh ho hum, the linebackers aren't good. Here, call up Santrell. You know?
Right. Yeah. This isn't depth is not an issue for linebacker for the Panthers, and which I mean would just make it even more impressive if he does crack the active roster, just how good he is. So, looking forward to seeing that. Rooting for him again. I think it'd just be another great example of like, hey, maybe these guys coming out of college should just head to the USFL. So, super excited to see what he does. But again, not going to be surprised because we are super deep at backer.
Yeah.
But while we may have been wrong a little bit on Failure and Hill making the roster, we did get a few things right.
Oh yeah, we actually got quite a bit.
We got quarterback, which I mean, granted, quarterback and running back,
Not
kind of
hard.
a gimme, kind of a gimme. So still gonna give ourselves props, but not gonna pat myself too hard on the back. I would not have really thought of Josh Bassix being our fullback being signed in as a tight end. So not, not 100%, but pretty damn close. And then we got our corners and linebackers. Well, at least two of our three. I think we believed that. I don't think we had Patty starting. I think we had Dawkins,
No.
and
And hey,
that's where we
Patty
were
made some
wrong.
plays.
Oh, he did. He absolutely did. He got that fumble recovery from Ballard. So like I said, our backers were all over the place. Like that's one area that I have zero concerns about right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great to watch. Meanwhile, we each got our own position group right, so we kind of even that out. You got the receivers right.
I
Meanwhile,
did.
on the opposite end, I got the tight ends right.
Yeah, I was adamant that I thought Markway was going to be that second tight end because we traded for him. But no, you were right. Hikatini got that nod, but obviously Ball was going to be tight end number one, and he scored TD number one. So that one,
Yeah,
that was an obvious one.
and Hikutini got a few got a little bit of action his way too. He got a reception, and I think he was the target for the Joe Walker pass. Um, that was incomplete, but hey, always worth the effort.
Yeah, that play was good. I think that actually was Baugh, but it
I mean, either
was
way.
yeah. I love that play. I want to do more of those, but missed opportunities. But speaking
Yeah.
of that, it's actually time to talk about that game. And what a game it was. It definitely had its moments, but overall, Panthers won 29-13, the second largest margin of the weekend, trailing only the Stallions' 17-point victory over the Generals. So, not too shabby after what outing we put up against the Gamblers last year.
Oh yeah.
Of course, we talked about it just a minute ago, is that Josh Love went 18 of 20 for 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and league-leading 151 QBR. So, hell of a start there. We did, of course, see Carson Strong. He was perfect, 5 of 5, but he is not going to break the record as, again, minimum temp was 14. He was sacked twice, so that's something interesting that we can get into. Joe Walker, as we expected, wide receiver number one, 6 catches for 105 yards and a tutty. Well, Stevie Scott was probably a little bit of a surprise to both of us, with him actually leading the two rushers with 12 rushes, 61 yards for a 5.1 yard per carry average and a tutty. And then, of course, on the defensive side, defensive player of the week, Breland Speaks, got 3 sacks, a forced fumble, 7 tackles, including 2 tackles for loss, and then safety Warren Saba and linebacker Noah Dawkins each tallied an interception. So hell of a dominant defensive performance, where, of course, we saw a little less efficiency. Special teams, Cole Murphy was perfect for his field goals, but uncharacteristic, he went 2 for 4 on his PATs, where last year, over the 5 weeks that he was with the Panthers, he was 100% for PATs. So not his finest outing. He said he will be better this week. I believe him. Time of possession actually ended up really quite about 50-50. Panthers just under 29 and a half minutes, and Houston with just over 30 and a half minutes. Really close. Did not look like that at all at halftime. Houston was dominating
No.
time of possession. I think they about doubled the Panthers in time of possession at halftime. So that second half, wildly different. Wildly different.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the key things that kind of kept the Gamblers in much longer than they realistically should have been, was the fact that they were just sitting on the ball forever.
Yeah, they
Like,
like
they
they
were
held on about twice as much.
yeah, and they were moving the ball very slowly, but they were moving it at just enough to constantly be moving the chains. Meanwhile, the Panthers, during the first half, we were playing so fast and at such a breakneck pace that we didn't need the ball for that long. And then of course in the second half we kind of slowed it down a little bit and everything kind of balanced out. It it was definitely a good outing on offense. And the defense too, once the defense got really clicking and once the defense kind of tired out the offense, the defense really showed.
Yeah.
That was really when that honestly I think was when the difference was made, was once the offense of Houston got a little bit tired.
Yeah, and that's a good thing for us to actually be able to have a defense that doesn't tire out that easily. So that was good to see. Red zone was interesting. Michigan was 2 of 4, but the caveat there was the last failed attempt, one of the two failed trips into the red zone that came up without or without a touchdown, was that final interception by Dawkins. He returned it back to the 19. So we did technically get set up in the red zone, and of course, victory formation from that point. So failed red zone attempt, but in reality, if we wanted to, with the way that our offense was clicking, we were going to punch that one in. Houston was 2 of 3 in the red zone scoring touchdowns. Their second touchdown, honestly, they kind of got you know, we aided them with the DPI on that third and long. So
Yeah.
still a touchdown that
And
we gave up, still a touchdown, but not
yeah.
quite like they were dominant in the red zone.
Yeah, it wasn't great. It was it was a solid showing on the red zone front, and obviously once we kind of got going, Houston was pretty much dead in the water. I think their third trip to the red zone was the one that ended up in the the forced fumble from Breland Speaks, um, where they got close, but there was no cigar for the Gamblers on that one.
Yeah, defense was definitely better than I was anticipating. So we'll we'll see how we do in the red zone against these Stars. That will be quite the test. And Panthers are leading the league in turnover margin. We went +3 against the Gamblers with 2 fumble recoveries, 2 interceptions. Of course, we turned the ball over once with that Joe Walker muffed punt that set up the Gamblers for their second and final touchdown of the game. So still +3, a lot better than what we were last year. I think last year we still may have ended up in the black there with turnover margin, but it wasn't as pretty. So if we keep this up, then I think we'll be will be sitting pretty.
Yeah. Like again, the defense was just all over Houston when it came to the turnover battle. We had that one pick from Saba that got us back down to the 2, even though it almost went back to Houston there for a sec. The pick to end the game, then obviously the 2 forced fumbles, one on a 3rd and short that gave us the ball back, and obviously the one with Breland Speaks getting Kenji Bahar in the backfield. On the whole, when it came to turnovers, this defense, I think it had to have been like half of the drives in the second half ended as turnovers for Houston or something. It felt like that almost.
Yeah, it was wildly different from the first half. I mean, so from my takeaway anyway, we look good. Shortest way to put
Yeah,
it, we looked good.
yeah.
Probably
I,
the most complete performance that we've seen out of the Panthers, at least against anybody other than the Maulers. Like, we seem to have those complete games against the Maulers last year, but anybody else, there was always something lacking. And this year, maybe the Gamblers are last year's Maulers, and maybe this isn't, something that we should pat ourselves too hard on the back for. But looked like a complete team, and
yeah.
I'm thrilled with it. We
I mean,
finally got
hey,
some stats
th-
on defense.
yeah. I mean, hey, we have we haven't they haven't been proven to be the Maulers yet, so that could be
No.
the case. But yeah, no. I mean, it was a huge improvement from year one. Everything felt so much different, especially on offense. It honestly had me wondering at points during the game, like how much did Jeff Fisher kind of like meddle in the offense during last season? Like how much of last year's offense was Marty's doing, and how much of it was Jeff Fisher kind of like getting his hands in where maybe he shouldn't have on offense.
I feel like maybe there were some points that Fisher probably got involved, but honestly, I think it was, Marty's first attempt at being an OC at the pro level. He was also, had to, again, first time being OC at the pro level, having to try to figure out how to build an offense. Plus that carousel at quarterback, with Lynch and Patterson, and then of course with Love, and then Barrier for the one game. So having some consistency, not knowing how to build an O line, like giving him that second year, giving him that chance to retool over the offseason, have a quarterback that he can actually return that knows his offense. I mean, I think this is kind of your natural conclusion. This is what that brings. And that is one area where I was super happy to know that Nolan wasn't going to mess with the offense and he was going to leave it for Marty. Because because again, last year we had surprisingly good stats for offense. Give that second year and see the potential realized. And granted, week one against the Gamblers, but it kind of proves my belief right a little bit.
Yeah, like again, I'm excited to see what happens. I think I pointed out in the chat a few times where like if it wasn't for for the few mistakes we made, and it wasn't for that little period of kind of self constraint we put on ourselves towards the end of the first half, that game should have been 40-6. That game in most cases would have ended like 40-6, 35-6 or something like that.
Oh yeah, it
Like
wasn't as
it
close
may
as the
have been a
score
two
indicates.
possession win. Yeah. Scoreboard made it look close, but most people would agree that the Panthers probably had the best win of the four on the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless you're a
And
Stallions.
unless you're a Stallions fan, of course. Well, I mean, just looking at it, that momentum shift that the Gamblers had at the end of the first half there because of that muff punt. I mean, we literally set them up inside the red zone. That and
Yeah.
then we gifted it with the DPI. But if we didn't turn the ball over there, if we didn't give them that, if we would have continued our momentum, we could have very well scored there. Like, our offense was still clicking. Our offense didn't stutter. It did a little bit when with Strong in, but it wasn't like we weren't able to move the ball at all. Again, he was 5 for 5. He was able to get the ball out. We were able to complete passes and move the ball. They never really stopped our running game. So, at the very least, we would have been able to punt the ball and, get them backed up a little bit further. Yeah, I think you could have wiped out that second touchdown for them, and then, we could have scored again in the first half, and like you said, just completely blow the game wide open. So definitely closer than what the score indicated, but we definitely got to clear up those mistakes.
Yeah. And like that's one of the few kind of critiques that I can take away from this week. Um like the few others, like the big thing for me, there was one thing on offense and one thing on defense that I felt like were kind of things that I still have a concern over. And a lot of that just comes down to the scheming. On offense, it felt like we had no real big play potential. Like, sure, we kind of had those. We had like that. What was it? A 25-yard touchdown to Joe Walker was the last one.
35.
Like, it was a pretty decently big one. Yeah, but it felt like we didn't have really too many plays that were capable of like flipping the field. You know, those plays where you go from your own 35 or 30 and you go and you flip it to their 35, 30, 25. It's not really that big of an issue, but in situations where we're going to need big yards fast, I do worry that we might not have that full ability.
Yeah, and I know you have a little bit more faith in the O line than I do, but I think my concern, like you just pointed out, we don't have that big play capability because even just that 35-yard touchdown pass to Joe Walker, Love got hit as he threw. Like he had to stand in the pocket and take some hits as he delivered some brilliant throws. Which kudos to him. Like I said, he had a hell of a game. Like he is one of, granted, we have a few bright spots on our team for this past week, but he's certainly right up there at the top of them. And being able to stand in the pocket, get hit, and deliver those throws like he did was brilliant. And that's why we were able to move the ball so well we did, especially when he was in the game. But yeah, that I'm still skeptical, especially with how little time our quarterbacks had to make decisions. I'm a little more skeptical about our offensive line. And yeah, like you said, that's going to, potentially hamper our ability to flip the field and score quickly if we ever need to. Like we don't have that big downfield play ability. Uh, we really need our running backs to be that home run hitter at this point. And unless we can show some improvement, some cohesion this week, of camp or of practice, then you know, then that's probably my biggest concern.
Yeah. Meanwhile, on the flip side, on the defensive end of the football, um, really the only issue that I had was some issues I had with the coverage scheme. We played behind the Gamblers way more than I think we would have felt comfortable with. And obviously for the Gamblers, they didn't really prove to be that big of an issue. They constantly played it short. They didn't really go anything super deep. But I worry, especially against the Stars, and we'll get to this when we get to the preview. How are we going to handle when the Stars just send guys deep? When our whole thing is to play behind guys, you know,
I
on
guess
defense, in the secondary.
I don't know. I want to know how they're gonna scheme for Case, but I think the way that they did that was that they knew Kenji wasn't going to beat them over the top. Also, they kind of had to keep an eye on Bahar. Like he's maybe not the
Yeah,
most mobile quarterback in the USFL, but he is a mobile quarterback, and he's certainly more mobile than what Case Cook is going to show us on Sunday. And you can see that he gashed us a few times with his legs. Not anything that just was completely blew the game wide open. Nothing that was super spectacular, but we had to respect his ability to run, and I think that played a little bit of a part in how our secondary was set up. Not so tight with our man. So I'm hoping that that's the case, and it's just gonna change, week to week depending on our opponent. But yeah, I'm with you on. I wasn't super thrilled with some of the chunk plays they were able to get at times.
Yeah. Again, that might come down to a week to week scheming thing. Because I know we were talking DMs kind of mid game, like, yeah, the defense played overall. Just the one issue is that they were letting up too many completions to begin with, especially
Yes.
during the first half. Um, again, like at the end of the day, I consider these mostly just nitpicks of the way we were playing.
Yeah, just
Nothing that'll really make or break anything.
right, just concern, stuff to watch for, stuff to not, feel invincible about. Obviously, you know, coaches are going to watch film, players are going to watch film. They're going to see where any deficiencies are, and I imagine that that's, some of their areas of concern. But that's what I'm looking for, especially with having Ramen out. I really do wonder what his loss will do. Again, I like our roster. As I was waxing poetic, kind of as a cop out, love our roster top to bottom. I think we can plug and play. Really going to have to be seen. But I mean, overall, I'm still super impressed with the defensive staff. Like all of the guys from, top to bottom with Coach Nolan, Brown, Bauer, and then Runza. Like they had their positions just they had the defense humming overall. Again, I mean, it doesn't hurt that you have one guy go off with 3 sacks, a forced fumble, 7 tackles, like you did with Speaks. But I mean, other players got involved too.
Yeah,
Like
that always
Speaks
helps.
wasn't the yeah, Speaks was not the only one to get tackles. Like there were a few other players I think on the team that got 7 tackles as well, or credited for 7 tackles as well. So it's not like he was the only one. You had Ballard with that forced fumble that Fisher then snatched up. Then you had the other sack from McMillan. So it's not like it was just one or two guys that had a game. So love seeing the entire
Yeah.
defense get some stats. Again, finally the defense got stats. Like that was a thing last year. Like we were able to get some pressure on quarterbacks, but we never really got to hit home. Like we had Jack for sacks. I think maybe we totaled 15 sacks last year, if my memory serves right. And if that's the case, we're already a quarter there after one game. Like if we keep that up, and with the way that Philly's offensive line is, maybe we could be halfway there after this game.
Yeah, and especially when a lot of the times the only reason why Bahar didn't get sacked because he was sprinting all over. He was going here, there, and everywhere.
Well,
You
exactly.
know,
That was also kind of my point. Like having to account for his ability to do that, I think also kind of forces you to allow you know some chunk plays, and I always hate mobile quarterbacks.
yeah,
Well, hate defending against them.
and
I
also
love them when they're on my team.
yeah, absolutely. We could probably if we were a Wolverines podcast, we could start waxing poetic about Denard Robinson right now.
And JJ.
um, yeah, true. It's just whenever I think Michigan mobile quarterback, I always think Denard. Still to this day. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah,
that was something else.
speaking of the ability to run the ball, I think one of the more unexpected developments we saw this weekend was Reggie Corbin was not the number one runner. It was Stevie Scott throughout the majority of the game.
Yeah, and it's not like Reggie even ran poorly too. I think he still averaged over 3 yards per carry. Nothing, you know, nothing super fantastic, but still ran the ball pretty well. But it was definitely clearly Stevie's game. Like, dude was running hard, and he definitely showed like what 5 yards per carry on this one, I think. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely his game.
It
He was definitely RB1 on Sunday.
yeah, and I think a large part of that just kind of came down to how it came down, I think, how they were playing it was whoever had the momentum. Like, they didn't have schedules, they didn't have a super strict Stevie goes in for 3 plays, then we send in Reggie for 3 plays, dot, 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 dot. It was very clearly just, you run until you can't anymore. And there were very few times with Stevie when he was in where it was like, oh, Stevie can't run. We got to put in Reggie. It was just Stevie was working. Why sub him out? I think was more so what happened. It wasn't like Reggie was bad, just Stevie was that good.
Yeah, no, like I said, both of them ran really well. I have zero issues with how either of them ran. Definitely Stevie's game to take over, and we'll be curious to see if he's listed as number one on the depth chart this week or if we go back to Reggie. Either way, I'm not going to complain if either one of them ends up being RB1 because that's still a hell of a 1-2 punch. Now,
Yeah.
what needs work, though, I think the biggest area of need for us, at least for what we saw this past weekend, was our special teams. That was not
Yeah.
something I was expecting to have to say going into this week. Uh, Gonna just kind of gloss over Murphy's 2 missed PATs. I think that's something that he can clean up, and that's not gonna be an issue. The biggest thing for me
Yeah.
was that muffed punt, but maybe not even that, but the punt protection, on our end when we were punting
Yeah.
the ball. Kramer did not have the
Horrible.
time that he needed to be able to punt. Like, he still punted pretty decently. I think he still averaged like 37, and that included like a touchback. But it it was not great. One of his punts did get
No.
tipped. So like the Fairman needs to get on his guys and get the special teams cleaned up there, especially with that punt protection because as we all know, like we thought that that muffed punt, was a momentum changer. Yeah, so are blocked punts. So I
Yeah.
definitely want to see that cleaned up for sure.
Yeah, and I think the big issue, because like even like the stuff with Cole Murphy and even the Joe Walker muff, those are just, you can chop those up to mistakes that happen. Even with Joe Walker, I still think like he should have just let it bounce. That punt was clearly short of where it was gonna be, and it was gonna bounce in the end zone, right? There's no shame in just letting a punt bounce when you're in that situation. But yeah, the punt coverage and the punting in general was not where I think it should have been, and it did not really meet our expectations because yeah, we played really close to the fire on a few of those punts.
Yeah,
And again, I
I was
hope it
not happy.
improves.
I think it will.
I hope it improves, and definitely, your punting can be a problem that's avoided if the rest of your offense is doing its job. But you definitely want you want everything to be working, not just one or two sides of the ball.
Exactly. But I mean, ultimately, like I liked what we saw. Officiating was actually not too bad either. So that was another thing. I know we talked
No,
about officiating, having some officials going to the NFL. They did pretty good, though. I I am a little confused by the kick catch interference calls, though. At least they called it fairly. At least each team got one called on them. But so apparently in the USFL, you can push your defender into your guy and get a kick catch interference call. Is that a thing?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's what I DM'd you about, especially the one that they called us on, where it was very clearly he got pushed into the guy. And like had he not gotten pushed, it wouldn't have been an issue. Um, but yeah, that frustrated me watching that. Like, apart from that, though, the officiating was fine. Like, I don't think there was any like egregiously bad spots or like super egregious calls or no calls. The only one that was a little bit hairy was I think there was one helmet to helmet contact, but that was when the guy was in the air, so that's considered like fair game. Um, like on the whole, again, not terrible, but you know, I guess when it comes to officiating, it's they do a good job if you're not thinking about them.
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't have any issues. I think my biggest complaint other than that was I don't think the Gambler's first touchdown was a touchdown. I think he got stopped short of the line to gain, short of the end zone, but they gave it to them. I mean, with the way we were playing on that drive anyway, we were gonna let them score. So I guess I'm not too terribly broken up about it, but mm, yeah, no clean. So, guess takeaways. What was your biggest surprise on that game?
The biggest surprise for me, easily, I mean, honestly, it was the passing game. I know we were a good passing team last, but it felt like for the first time this week that it felt like we had this godlike passing. You know, that it felt like it was a complete package from pretty much start to finish. Everyone did their part. Joe Walker went off. Ish Hyman had a few big plays. Even Trey Quinn had that touchdown that I thought was really good. Like
Yeah.
on the whole, as a trio, the receivers did great, and Love helped him out as much as he could, if not more. Like the whole game performance on the passing attack, 10 out of 10. I really don't think you could have done better.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. For me, the most impressive aspect of our gameplay on Sunday was our passing game. Like that was probably the arguably the best uh, you know, part of the game that we had. But that's not my most surprising. My most surprising because I kind of expected our offense to be able to click. I expected that Josh was able to make his reads and make the throws decisions that we needed to make. So, as impressed as I am by that, not quite a surprise. At least not as surprised as I was of finally seeing our defense getting stats. Like, yeah, I that was probably the thing that I was most worried about. Like, definitely was more confident in Coach Nolan coming in and being able to, make our defense more competent. But to be that dominant, especially on the line, was very welcomed, and that was probably the most surprising for me.
Yeah.
And then
On the whole, I mean, not much more you could ask for out of that game, really.
yeah, and I think the last thing that we probably need to kind of talk about is Carson Strong. Um, I I liked what I saw out of him for the most part, but it seems like he was 5 for 5. So when he threw the ball, when he was able to get the ball released, it went to where it needed to go. But sacked a couple of times, and it did not seem like our O line gave him any time. I don't know if it just was that Josh Love was making that much quicker of decisions than Strong was, but it feels like to me at least gameplay, as I was watching it live, it just felt like our O line wasn't giving him as much time. So kind of curious about that. was a little annoyed that we went with him for as long as we did. Not because I don't think that he's good or could be QB1. I very much think that, he's going to be pushing Love at other points during the year. Maybe not this week. I think Love, has earned the QB start, but I I just don't like that when we did not have the game in hand, that we went away from that and had Love or Strong in for as long as we did. So that was probably my biggest gripe on that. But otherwise, what I saw from him, kind of hard. Like our offense stuttered. I don't know if again that was a him thing or if it was just that gamblers kind of dialed something up that just worked perfectly against us when he was in the game. But definitely looking forward to seeing him playing more and kind of getting a better feel. But still not quite entirely sure how to feel about his performance, but it wasn't bad. Like, again, 5 for 5. It's not like he was completely ineffective.
Yeah. I think he was just not comfortable enough in our scheme yet. It seemed like Love was more prepared for exactly what was going to happen, while while Strong just wasn't.
Yeah, he may have needed a
Was
little bit
the
more time
main
to
thing.
process. Yeah. I still kind of feel like our offensive line had more to do with that than anything, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes this week. I'm not sure. I believe that the Stars defense is going to be any bigger of a challenge. So we'll see about that. Anything else you
Yeah.
want to talk about this past week?
No, I think we were pretty dang thorough. It was a good win. I liked what I saw. Um, Hopefully we can build on into next week.
Yeah, so week 1 is officially in the books. We can now leave that behind. 1-0. Hopefully that is the theme that we go every week, but 1-0 and obviously early in the season still very much in the hunt and controlling our own destiny. And now on to week 2. So before we get into our matchup, power rankings.
Yes.
Let's talk power rankings. Now, uh there was definitely a common theme in the power rankings as they were getting released or posted about by everybody in the community is Panthers all of a sudden being, in the bottom half shot shut up. Because it seems like people did not have enough faith in the Panthers coming into the season, but they were quick to make the adjustments. And I may have been one of them, but I
I,
got it
I, I
corrected.
I was gonna say, didn't we have him at like 6 last week?
I did, yes, I did. So yeah, I changed my tune real quick, and so did the rest of the community. So I will very much eat my crow there. I happily will admit that I was wrong, but after what we saw last year, I wasn't gonna get my hopes up, but now I'm fully bought in. But so the USFL community rankings finally came out for week 2, which includes some names around the community, and I think we all agree who is bringing up the rear this week with the team that we handily beat this past weekend in the Houston Gamblers. Again, not much to say about the Gamblers. Did not see anything from them that was really impressive. Bahar wasn't bad, but he wasn't good. He used his legs against us
Yeah.
to decent effect, as we discussed, but nothing about the Gamblers even remotely reminds me of what they were like last year. So
Yeah.
I'm not high on them, and I mean, I don't think there's really a whole lot else to say. I don't think anybody else is high on them.
No, the only real genuine bright spot I'd say from them was running back TJ Pledger. Because there were a few moments where he was lighting it up for him, but one running back, as we learned last year, one running back does not a football team make. And
No.
the rest of the gamblers outside of TJ Pledger they were just blech, very blech.
Yeah, I think the only other team that I've seen routinely put as being worse than the Gamblers are the team that I have, or well, actually no, I still have them at number 6, but Maulers, the team that lost the final game of last week, the community rankings have them at 7. You and I are not quite as low on the Maulers as the rest of the community apparently is. I still not
Yeah,
impressed with them. Their offense is atrocious. I do not know what Horton was doing with that play calling and that QB switching on the last drive. The the routes over the middle, the running up the middle, like with a minute to go,
yeah, it was bad on offense.
it was embarrassing. They did not score a single touchdown on offense. They had to do a or punt return and then that defensive touchdown, which granted, their defense is scary. That's the only reason why they're not right there for me at either 7 or 8 is because their defense is pretty scary, especially with Reuben Foster. He definitely shined, and he was right up there. I think he was the second place behind Breland Speaks for the fan vote for the defensive player of the week. So he certainly played. He certainly played well, and they have a defense, but community has them at 7. You and I have them at 6. Now we disagree though on our 7. I I have the boats. I probably
Yeah,
have them way too low. But I'm still not impressed. Like they hung with the Stars, but again, Stars defense not been one that been particularly, you know, scared of.
they were
As
yeah
we'll
they
discuss
were
in our
cracking.
matchup. Yeah. So I'm not, and I still don't like Haley. Like I don't know. Like, and I haven't seen enough that performance against the Stars defense. It's not enough to move the needle for me.
Yeah. Meanwhile, for me, I gave the Generals a very harsh punishment for their frankly humiliating loss to the Stallions week 1. I understand the Stallions are the best team in the league, right? And it's not like there's no shame in losing to the Stallions as is. There is shame in not even really making it much of a football game, which is what the Generals did. They failed to really make it even that much of a football game to begin with, and it just nothing seemed to really be working. Like, it was weird to watch. Like, they should have been decent, but you know, Johnson, I think he got, what was it? I think he was hurt early, if I remember correctly. And so they had to rely on Dakota Prukop, who Prukop is not very good. Is kind of the issue there. Like, it's not he isn't like a train wreck quarterback, but God, he did not help New Jersey's matters really at all throughout the night. And while I think that there is hope for for the Generals, I think every team here outside of the Gamblers, I can point to something and be like, they can rely on that to win football games. Um, the Generals just they showed the least, and well, in season 2, week 1's all we have to go off of, and they showed me the 7th most.
Yeah, I guess I can't complain too much. Like outside of maybe the top 4, I'm not a big proponent of any team. Like outside of the top 4, I don't really have an opinion on too much. At least not where they are above each other. Like they're kind of fairly all interchangeable. Though I will say that I have the Generals at number 5, so they're maybe the team on the bottom 4 that I have the most confidence in. Community is closer to you in that they have the Generals at number 6. I think you pretty much summed it up, though. There's just not a whole lot, not a whole lot from what we saw from them. They definitely, at least from their performance on Saturday, they were missing, Perez and certainly missing, Turpin. So I'm not quite as ready as some others to count them out. Count out the coach of the year from last year. So give them time, but yeah, at least for me, they're my number 5. Uh, community's number 6 and year number 7. So still, kind of we are not super impressed with them, but I guess I'm a little more impressed by them, or at least not as disappointed by them. That's probably the better way to put it than the rest of you. And of course, the community
Yeah,
has the Showboats at number 5. I already said why I don't have any faith in them, but
yeah. I
you
mean,
disagree with all of us.
yeah, I have both you and the community have the Breakers at 4. I have the Breakers at 5, mostly because while they won, they just did not look that impressive in any real facet. Like on offense, yeah, MBT had 300 yards, but it took him like double the pass attempts of any other quarterback in the league to do it, and he barely scratched 300 yards. Um, and it honestly made me think if they were going up against the Maulers, I think they would have lost week 1. Even if they went up against the Generals, I think they would have ended up losing that game. Um, MBT just didn't look fully ready for the American game again. After spending so much time up in Canada, obviously they just didn't rely on the running game, which I mean to be expected. That's what the Breakers do. And the defense was they played fine, but how much of that is their defense being good, and how much of that is the fact they played the Mauler?
I think a
Like,
mix because I don't know. I give it a mix personally.
yeah, like I don't think the Breakers are bad, but I do think of the winners this week, they were probably the worst of the bunch. They definitely played probably the worst game of the 4 winners.
Yeah, I definitely I would agree with that for sure. And then so
Obviously,
why are you so high in the boats?
well, I mean, the main thing was once they got going, they showed that they had fight at the bare minimum. Now, I will be honest, the cutoff for me between the top 3 and the bottom 5 is pretty decently big. And the boats they could have slid down to 5 or even 6 depending on how that game finished out. And especially if they were playing like they were early, where I described them as I did to you. Diet Tampa Bay, who couldn't even make the playoffs with the best quarterback in spring ball. Um, they they were rough, but they had some upside. Like once Ryan Willis got going, or it was the backup. Once the backup got going, things were looking pretty up for for the boats, and the defense was fine. The defense had some. It went through some retooling, but when they came out in the second half, they held their own against Philadelphia. It looked like it was going to be a runaway, like 40, 50-point win for the Stars for a bit there. But the Boats were able to corral them, ring them back in, and make it a football game again. And that was really the main thing I noticed, and the main thing that made me go, like, okay, I think the Boats can still be something. Although again,
Mhm.
like when it comes to the boats and the breakers, you're almost split between those two teams.
Yeah. Yeah, and I put the Breakers at number 4 just because well, not just because they were one of the 4 teams to win, but I mean, a win is a win. Gonna give them credit for that, but you know, their offense is something. I give their defense a little more credit than maybe some others do with that performance against the Mullers. Yes, the Mullers offense looked absolutely horrible, but I mean, still held them to 3 points on offense. And Breakers scored where they needed to. They got 5 field goals and they were able to score a couple touchdowns or a touchdown with their offense. So, you know, better than the Maulers. I guess maybe I should have the votes higher than them, but right now I'm sticking with the Breakers at number 4 just because they pulled it out and I like their offense. I like them having Adams. I like them having Dixon. I like them having you know, MBT. So I'm a little high on them for that. We'll see. Then everybody here, we agree with the community in these top 3 and in the specific order. Now, number 3, of course, I think as expected, we could only bump the Panthers so high. And so number 3 is it. And quite honestly, my hesitancy even to put us here in some things, I kind of feel like maybe we're ranking the Panthers too high. But out of what we saw on this past weekend, obviously we're high in what we saw. We waxed poetic. We talked about all the good, but we still don't know who the gamblers are. So I'm a little hesitant to have us at number 3, but for lack of, more information, more data sets, I land us at 3. I think we could drop certainly over the course of the year, but I also think that, you know, maybe this is even a low spot for us. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think really with the Panthers, the main reason why I don't put them higher is that same reason. It's mostly just a mental thing. I'm sure if like lived in some vacuum where we only saw the 4 games and like we had no context or anything else, I'm pretty sure most of us would put the Panthers at 2,
2 or
or a
3,
lot
yeah.
of people would put the Panthers maybe a spot up. But the plus side for everyone, number 2 is the Stars. And who do the Panthers play this week? The Stars. So it's very easy for us to basically put up or shut up this week.
Yeah. So that order will be figured out if the Panthers or Stars should be number 2. Like you said, that gets settled this weekend. And then for lack of reason, but the defending champions continue to roll and they won by the largest margin of victory this past weekend. Stallions get to stay at number 1. They lose Jamar Smith for the rest of the season. They lose was it Williams or
I
they
think
lose
so.
one of their weapons out for the rest of the season, so they're not as necessarily, maybe they're not as potent as they could be, but until they're beaten, until they're even threatened, I'm going to leave them as number 1 for now. Hopefully that changes, and obviously, actually, I hope that they stay undefeated until week 6, and then we get to be the ones to knock them off and claim that top spot. But yeah, I mean, I don't really think it's any more complex than that. That's why I have them as my number 1.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. Like it's not a runaway. They aren't like leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else in the league. I would say realistically, you could probably throw a blanket over the top 3 as things currently stand in terms of who could beat who in any given moment.
Right, and especially like
Um
you said, in a vacuum. Absolutely.
You know, it's a close league. You know, and honestly, it makes me excited for the next 11 weeks of football.
Well, and we're gonna be in all those 11 weeks.
Yeah, if things go according to plan, we will,
That's what
and
I'm
we'll be
pulling
winning,
for.
and we'll be recording about 11 more victory week episode podcasts.
Well, alright, so maybe you shouldn't try to encourage people to root against the Panthers. Don't threaten them with us recording more episodes.
uh, anyways,
Alright.
we got it. Well, one of those weeks coming up this week, ain't it? For the week two.
Yeah, alright, so it's finally time to look forward to week 2 a little bit. So Sunday at 7 on FS1, we of course are facing the Philadelphia Stars. The biggest oddity of this week, this matchup is the fact that All Stars may be the Detroit hub mate of the Panthers, and that we are quote unquote visiting the Stars. The game is not going to be played in Fort Field. I know we've mentioned this a few times, and anybody paying attention is well aware that this game is going to be in Canton. So it's going to be another game with an empty crowd. Obviously, not going to be on OTA. So probably not going to be the most impressive numbers, but it is going to very likely be the most impressive game of the week. It is certainly my game of the week.
Yeah, I mean, compared to the other matchups this week, Panthers Stars. You know, I remember in the middle of the third quarter last week, people were already getting hyped about the prospect of Cookus versus Love. You know, so now that we actually get to see it this week, and comparing it to like the other, but comparing it to the other matchups this week, it they don't really hold a candle to Michigan versus Philadelphia, apart from maybe the Memphis Birmingham game.
Yeah, that'll definitely let us know where Memphis actually sits. But our game is the only 1-0 team matchup. So, which granted doesn't say a whole lot after 1 week, but still, this game gives the winner the early lead in the North. So that'll be probably pretty important. I think the North is actually going to be the toughest division in the USFL this year versus like the South was last year. So it's going to be important to kind of get that jump. Especially going to be important for the Panthers, I think, with then having that 4 game home game stretch, which I guess since we're hub mates with the Stars, same thing for them. They have 4 game home stretch as well. So, but it'll be important for either team to come out with a win and be able to then have their home games. Of course, Panthers will be able to do that in front of an actual crowd of more than just a few dozen or few hundred. So, that'll be super beneficial to help get the crowd involved. So I'm really hoping that the league rigs it for the Panthers this week. But even more than that, I hope the Panthers don't need it rigged, and then we just come out and start swinging and lay a few haymakers and or land a few haymakers and get a clean win. But and then maybe get the series all time series a little bit more even. We were 0-2 last year versus the Stars, and then that puts us at 1-4 in the all-time series, with the only win being that 1983 USFL Championship game. So it'd be nice to notch another win against these Stars.
Yeah, especially considering last year both those games against the Stars were pretty painful in their own unique ways too. It was such fun.
Yeah, such a
We had
dichotomy
some
that.
stars last year.
Oh, yeah, they're not my most favorite team. No, it does seem to be though too. Speaking of, the league did kind of have like more of those videos with the interviews with the players, and it does seem like the Panthers players for the most part are choosing the Stars as the team that they want to beat the most. So, hey, more power to it. Let that ambition really kind of lead them, empower them through the game because I honestly I think they're going to need it. This is going to be that tough matchup.
Yeah.
Early test in the year.
And yeah. And of course, Vegas, Vegas once again not favoring the Panthers, which fine. They didn't favor us last week. Look how that turned out. Um, and yeah, I definitely agree. Especially on the defensive backs. I know I harped about them in the first game, but I want to see. It'll be a bigger test to see what they're capable of, since we're taking on a team that's very much like down the field, attack deep. How are we going to be able to handle that? Will we be able to make sure that Cookus doesn't have the ability to throw downfield, take away those deep shot abilities that he has, and the ones that really define the Stars' offense. Um,
Yeah,
and
that'll be
obviously,
key.
yeah, obviously, a pretty quick way to do that is to make sure he doesn't throw at all, and that comes down to our defensive line doing its job.
Yeah, like I was going into last week's game, so many unknowns. Who are these teams? Honestly, well, I feel like we're closer to the answer. I still think we're at those. Who are we? How good is our offense? How good is our defense really? Um, because I think that the Gamblers have the potential just to be that bad. So I'm tempering my expectations a little bit. I do see that against the showboats that I'm not terribly impressed by their defense again. So as long as we continue to stay on schedule, that we continue to make those quick, decisive decisions and those accurate throws, I think that our offense is going to continue to roll. But then our defense is definitely going to be that. How do we handle Case and his passing prowess? And yeah, our D lines, our front seven's gonna have to get to him. We're gonna have to get a couple more sacks. And I think the Stars let up 5 sacks last week against the Showboats, if I'm not mistaken. So
Yeah,
if the Gamblers O line is no worse than the Stars O line, we should be able to eat. And we're going to need to. We're gonna have to get Case. He's not gonna be able to run like Bahar was able to last weekend. So we keep him off schedule. We keep him contained, which again shouldn't be too hard. I think we might be able to, get at least to get 2 more sacks, 3 more sacks, 10 sacks, whatever. Just get him a few times. And I think that will go a long, 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 long way in helping us secure a victory.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, because yeah, because most of the time, honestly, when Bahar was avoiding sacks, it wasn't because the O line was helping him; it's because he was running away. Cookus, especially since he's still relatively fresh off that injury, he's not going to be able to. He hasn't been able to really sprint away and evade pressure. It's kind of been his big downside during his time in the USFL. But yeah, again, I'm. It should be an interesting ball game no matter what.
Yeah, I think it might ultimately come down to again back comes back to our offense and the decision making. Like I have here, do not throw the ball at Stribling. Like dude
Yeah,
is a tall r- corner. He is a ball hawk. Now, if you want to bait him and use his aggression against him to get him to bite like the showboats did and be able to get him off the receiver so that you're not throwing it, directly at him, by means, do that. Use his aggression against him because he is an aggressive corner. So he likes playing hard, likes playing on it. He wants to jump it, and he's obviously been successful leading the league in interceptions last year. But If we use his aggression against him or just avoid his side of the field, almost entirely, unless, we have the edge there. Do that, I think our offense will have a decent time, at least in the passing game. Again, I don't think the Stars' defensive line's gonna be fantastic, so maybe Love gets a little bit more time in the pocket versus what we had last week. Hell, then, if that's the case, throw Strong in there in too and, see what he can do with a little bit more time. And that might also be a contributor, like you had mentioned in our kind of our discussion with the last week's matchup, is that maybe this gives us, if we give Strong, some time in the pocket, maybe he's the one to deliver that long ball, that deep threat. So that'll be interesting to see. I still think though, we need to go with the hot hand. I would ideally stick with Love as much as we can, but you know, throwing that out there. Maybe we see some packages with Strong. I I'm never the biggest fan of it, but whatever we can do to score on these
Yeah.
guys, because I think this is going to be a higher scoring game for sure than what we had last week.
Yeah, like last week, we did all the scoring. This week it'll be probably a little bit more split betwixt us and the Stars.
Yeah, I think we're
And
going to
as
need
a
to
matter
win
of
this
fact,
turnover battle.
yeah. Oh yeah, that's another one of the big ones is the Stars, one of the things that kind of kept them ahead and kept them just out of reach of the Showboats was their ability to just to take the ball away and just sit on it essentially. If we can do to them that, I think we'll be fine. Especially because, that's what we did to the Gamblers essentially in the second half. We took the ball away and we sat on it, and then we scored touchdown. We did what we needed to do. Meanwhile, for Philly, you know, they haven't been shown to be quite as turnover prone as Houston is. But if our defense is as good as we think it is, that shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I think we take care of the ball. We get, some pressure on Cookus. Again, I think that'll be easier than it was against Bahar last week. And we just try to, maybe we do play a little loose again with our DBs and, let them take what we give them. But ideally, I would like to, not give up a bunch of yards, but if we have to play the bend don't break still with, with it being still a new fresh defense being installed, uh, you know, it's not the sexiest, but if it gets the job done, then I'm all for it. And ultimately, I kind of think that's where we're at. Like neither of us exactly thinks either team is going to run away with anything. I still, of course,
Yeah.
think that, especially because we need it for next week. It will maybe not need it for next week, but it'll be a huge boost for attendance next week. I'm picking the Panthers. I'm obviously, above and beyond just being a Panthers fan, rooting for the Panthers. I think the best for the league
Mhm.
is for the Panthers to win. So putting all of that energy, all of that good juju into picking the Panthers this week. Again, going to be a close one. I think it's going to be like 33-29.
Yeah, I too am going to be taking the Panthers. It's going to be a very close ball game. Pretty much going to be down to the absolute last minute. Might be like a game deciding fourth down or score even. I'm giving it to the Panthers, but I'm making it as close as it can get. I'm giving Panthers 28-27.
I think I might be a little ambitious with the total score because, I'm putting us over 60 total points scored, but I think both offenses are capable of putting up those numbers. But yeah, I think it's going to be a close one. So either way, going for the Panthers, I'm excited to see it regardless of who wins the game. I think it's going to be a great one. not gonna be thrilled if we don't have, another victory Monday, but you know, I have confidence. I'm actually weirdly confident in us, which is why I give the 3 more points than you do.
Yeah.
But I don't believe there's really a whole lot else, so I think we can end this here. It's another fairly long episode this week. Lots to talk about from what we saw, so hopefully you stuck with us. There was no giveaway this week. Probably won't do that for another week or two. But so we do appreciate you listening. Of course, follow us everywhere that we are online. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. That's all at USFL Shadow. And if you want to hear us post BS on Twitter, follow me at Cheese Soda and Jack at Panthers Claw MI. And with that, we'll talk to you next week.